Looking for the best music for your videos? Then you should check out Art.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us. A few quotes for you to think about before we get going, and we will start shortly. And we will get started in just a moment. Good morning, and welcome to Pivot, Plan, and Reimagine Part 2. This is the second of a 4-part series on strategic planning. I hope you guess from the title, it's not necessarily the standard approach to planning, because how could it be? As we talked about last time, there is so much upheaval in our lives, our communities, our nation, our world, from fires to hurricanes, from pandemic to civil unrest, and now notorious RBG has left us. Our hearts and our minds are breaking. But we also see inspiration everywhere, and you see it and hear it from someone whose life you and your organization has changed. Most, if not all of your organizations have pivoted. You're still standing. You've already weathered the early days of the storm. Now the time has come to think about what is next, how to plan for the future you want and the future you want for your organization. Today, we will be talking about assessments, looking internally and looking externally. Not your typical SWOT, but introspection from finances to service alignment, constituents to people with lived experience. I hope you will look at the picture that begins to emerge for yourself and think about what next. For those who may not remember, I'm Sharon Danosky, president of Danosky Associates. For those who wish to learn more about me, I invite you to visit my website at www.danosky.org. Two people I very much want to acknowledge are Jackie Downing from the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven and Valerie Knight-Deganji from the Valley Community Foundation. I have to tell you, I am so impressed by the time and resources that these women and these foundations and their staffs have devoted to strengthening our sector, especially during a time of such enormous need and uncertainty. Jackie, would you like to say a few words? Oops, you're muted.
Thank you, Sharon. Good morning, all. So happy to be here this morning, and thank you all for taking the time to be here, particularly the board members who are carving out time in your day for this important conversation as it goes on. Sharon, you said it's a 4-part series. We are so grateful to have this actually as an 8-part series, because those interim roundtable discussions are so critical to ask follow-up questions to get some little more insight, to get some clarity around things that were presented in the content session. So encouraging everyone who's on the call today to make sure that you carve out the time for next week as well, to be able to follow up and ask those questions that come into your mind as you proceed in your work. We're so grateful to Sharon and Juanita Manning on the Danosky side for putting this together, Stephanie Chung on the Community Foundation side, and my thought partner, Valerie Knight-DeGangi. Stephanie, Valerie, and I planned lots of workshops in the year, and this year has been particularly challenging for us to find what organizations need. We've done a lot of listening, and we think we've been responsive to what's out there. We also have coming up after this series is over, a two-part series on strategic alliances. So if something you're considering is a merger or a partnership, we'll be doing some work on that in November. We also have some work coming up in racial and ethnic justice and equity. So we hope you will join us for some keynote speeches and then some real substantive work that you can do as an organization to start your journey in anti-racism. And we also have a workshop coming up on October 21st on managing, motivating, and supporting your staff virtually in this challenging time. So we hope you will be able to join us for those things. So Sharon, I know there's a lot to get through today. I'll turn it back to you. Thank you so much for being our partner in this. We appreciate your time and your expertise.
Thank you, Jackie. It's the same here. As always, housekeeping details, your mics are muted, video cameras are off. We will answer questions during and at the end of the webinar. And as always, I will stay longer to address if any other questions, if there are some. If I cannot get to your question or your question requires more context, I invite you to email us at info@danosky.com and I will answer them offline. I will also be asking you to participate and share some of your experiences and your own observations during this webinar. Yes, you will receive a copy of the deck, the recording, and templates that go along with today's presentation. And there will be a follow-up session next week, as Jackie mentioned, and I encourage you to think about the information presented here today so that you can take the opportunity to explore it with further discussions. And like Jackie, I want to recognize Juanita, my associate, who is the woman behind the curtain today and really every day. So thank you so much, Juanita. Now I'd like to know who is joining us today and your role in your organization. So Juanita, do we have a poll for that? Oops, nope, wrong one. I guess we don't have that poll today, so we'll move along. And as we begin to dig in, I would like to take a quick poll, and this is the poll we want to take. You can answer anonymously if you'd like, but if you could tell us, how is your organization faring during this pandemic? Very well. We are delivering services that are vital to our mission, to people who need them, and have the resources necessary to do so. And Juanita will put that poll up in just a second. We are holding our own. We are delivering most of our services and are breaking even. Or we are not doing well. We are only offering limited services and are concerned about our resources, or we are doing poorly. So if you could take a moment to answer that poll. So what we see is about 43%. I say you're doing really well. I think that's absolutely awesome, and congratulations. And another almost 30% holding your own. You know, a few organizations not doing well or doing poorly. So maybe what we're going to be talking here today can help you, and certainly for those who are doing well or holding your own, there's a lot to think about as you move forward. Before we delve into the subject matter at hand, I believe we should review some of what we discussed last time. In the follow-up Zoom meeting, to the last webinar, it became apparent to me that one element that is crucial to this and often tricky to deal with is the role of the board. I say tricky because what is the role of the staff and the role of the board in strategic planning? I have heard from some that the board really doesn't have the depth of knowledge to plan, which can often be true because they don't know the organization as the staff who are running the services. Certainly staff has more knowledge of what is happening and what is needed, but boards do have an important perspective. They should be brought into the discussion and be differently aligned, yet an equal partner in this business. If you are looking for expansion or contraction of services, or aligning with a strategic partner, or require significant capital to launch an initiative, it is the board that must vote on a strategic direction or raise the necessary capital. So it's important to bring them along and also hold difficult, uncomfortable conversations with them. And sometimes you can bring in someone from the outside to help facilitate these conversations. So it always isn't led by the executive director. And sometimes you can find volunteers to help with that. But it's important that the board is informed, is aware, and not just of what you're doing, but also what you're thinking and what you're wrestling with in order for them to be good partners. Last time, we also talked about the opportunity to reimagine your organization. Planning in the midst of a crisis can seem counterintuitive, yet it is also the exact right moment. Because when things are unsettled, you begin to perceive things differently and new opportunities emerge. Necessity is sometimes the mother of invention, as Thomas Edison said, and so it is. You have already started to view things differently. It is wise at this point to look at the data you have, to take stock of what has transpired, and to examine what other organizations have been doing. You are hopefully evaluating your mission, taking the pulse of the cultural shifts that are occurring, almost on a daily basis. When viewed over time, even during a seemingly short interval of 6 or 7 months, these multiple shifts are pointing to what may be some lasting trends. I hope you are able to engage in good discussion with your staff and your board members. You don't need to wait for a board meeting. Open up discussions at finance meetings or development committee meetings. For those of you who have children, you know that good conversation does not always occur during the time you have slotted for it. It happens spontaneously when people are comfortable. So don't be afraid to explore topics brought up in different venues. These conversations will form the scaffolding through which your strategic plan will take form. A pivot point for this discussion is still who do you serve and who is falling through the cracks. We're going to talk more about how to gather data that will provide a better understanding of not just who, but what. What is needed by people who receive services from your organization? What do people who attend your performances seek today? Because it's different than a year ago. I recently heard from a library who decided to show the artwork of a local artist in their building. They invited people, though only 5 people could walk through the library at a time, but they had a table with refreshments set up outside. People were so happy to be out and gather while socially distancing. And as one person said, I'm not sure you really needed to showcase an artist. I'm just happy to be here. That question of who and what really frames your strategic plan. Who and what? If you were founded today, what services would you be offering? We want to pair that question with a deeper dive into what you are doing, how successful that is, and what is being left out. We also want to align that question with the financial implications. Years ago, I worked in a Catholic hospital, which was run completely by nuns. Their favorite saying resonates with me today. No margin, no mission. So as we begin to assess your organization, both internally and externally, we will want to keep your vision front and center, look for opportunities, and face the challenges to make it a reality. So let's recap. It begins with your vision, which is at the heart of your organization. From there, you move out with your vision, your purpose, the cognitive representation of your vision. Vision and mission is surrounded by your values, your guiding principles. Then around these, you build your core services. And at the outer edges are the non-core services, the opportunity to form the alliances, which will create the community of support for the people you serve. To really explore core and non-core services requires data, both internal and external. Internal data is about what is happening within your organizational structure, employees, capacity. It also includes looking at your services and your financials. First, I want you to stop and think about your sources of revenue. Where is your money coming from, and how has that changed? Well, most nonprofits only have a few diversified sources, and I use the word diversified very loosely. Government contracts, grants, fee-for-service, philanthropy. What is happening to those sources? Where was your revenue coming from before COVID? How much from government contracts, grants, philanthropy, fee-for-service? Were there new programs tied to grant revenue that you were hoping to launch? What was the financial condition prior to COVID-19? How much of that revenue is sustainable? Can that new program grant revenue be converted to operating revenue? What revenue was available to you in the short term? Is that sustainable? Did that put you in a better financial situation? What revenue streams might be available that were not available before? Can you monetize differently? If you really invested in fundraising, not events, but in professional fundraising, what difference would that make? Have you ever explored social impact investing, taking on a non-traditional partner? What is important is that you understand where your revenue has been coming from, where it is anticipated to come from for the future, and whether or not that is sufficient, and if not, what are some other options? Here are a few questions for you to consider as you do this. Will this funding be guaranteed? For some of my clients, certain state funding contracts were cut, but they were still made whole through other means and services. If funding was cut, will it rebound in the next few months? Events may not rebound, but fundraising might rebound and has been rebounding extremely well when approached strategically and not tactically. Will the funding be lost for the rest of the year? If you are a symphony, you are exploring this right now and perhaps plotting how you can recoup some. Can you turn your event sponsors into program or mission sponsors, not supporting your concert or event, but supporting your mission and how you are delivering it? Finally, how dependent are you on revenue streams? Can you decrease the dependence from one revenue source and perhaps increase the availability of another source? If yes, how can you get the capital to make that transition? Have some thoughtful discussions around all of these questions. Again, engage your staff in a staff meeting. Engage your board, engage your finance committee to explore, brainstorm other options. Dedicate one finance committee meeting only to brainstorming, because probably on your finance committee, you've got people who have financial talents and they can begin to look at things if given the opportunity. And most important, start with yes when you are exploring this, or at least a maybe. Don't automatically go to no. That's all I'm saying. I also want to talk about the business model drivers. There are 4 basic types of business models for nonprofit organizations. One of these will be the primary driver for you to generate revenue. Some of you may also have a secondary driver that should be considered. The first is enrollment or dependency on numbers coming into the program each year. This would apply to schools, childcare, animal shelters, some work training programs. It usually entails attracting new individuals or entity or a progression of these into the program year after year. The second is retention. That is dependent on people coming back regularly, the same people. Performing arts organizations through a subscription model. Arts councils through a membership model. YMCA, environmental organizations, also through membership models, are all good examples of these. Next is liquidity. Where you are dependent on buildings, equipment, and other capital to operate and provide service. Examples of dependence on liquidity as a business model driver are community health clinics, hospitals, domestic violence shelters, homeless shelters. You need money to maintain, upgrade, or acquire new residences. Transitional or permanent residences for people with disabilities or mental health services are also examples of being dependent on a liquidity model. And then finally, there is what is referred to as reduced funding dependence. These are programs whose purpose is to reduce funding dependency on government services, to reduce dependency of individuals on government services, and help them create self-sufficiency. Neighborhood housing services, food insecurity are good examples. So let's take a poll and see who falls into which category. I'll give you a few minutes because you're going to have to think about this, but take a guess. Then you can go back and look at it. A lot of you are thinking, I can see that. Okay. So I think some of you now are beginning to make up your minds which you are. It's not I don't think it's an easy, necessary binary decision when you go into this, and yet I'm asking you to choose one of these four. And the reason being, it's important for you to understand your primary driver. Some of you may have a driver of retention or reduced funding dependence along with liquidity. So I recognize there might be two, but as you begin to develop your plans, it's really important that you do understand which model best represents your organization. All right, so the majority of you are enrollments or dependent on numbers coming into the program each year. So because of that, you have to put an effort into making sure you have those referrals. Retention, only 13% are there. You have to make an effort to make sure that those people are happy every single year. Liquidity, you have to make sure that you have the capital to make those improvements. And reduced funding dependence, you have to have access to resources so that you can continually keep those programs going. Thank you very much for doing that for me. I really appreciate it. Now it's time to take a quick look at expenses. Labor is at least 70% of the budget for most nonprofit organizations. So how many people were furloughed? How many came back? How many can come back? How many employees would you need in a reimagined organization with different services or a different way of delivering services? In what ways could you reconfigure your staffing and meet the needs and expectations of your organizations? And what about staffing? Do they have the tools you need for your reimagined world? What would happen with more or different training? How can you retain your staff of the future? Because it isn't all about salaries. Employees also look for benefits and the tools to do their work well. How dedicated have your staff been? We all know we want to pay a living wage for our employees. Maybe some of you can. And more for work done so well. How can that happen? And how can you find other means of making your nonprofit an employer of choice? Physical buildings are also a huge consideration. What happened during COVID? Do you need the same structures going forward? What other expenses, cleaning supplies, PPEs, they all need to be put on the table and considered. In case you haven't guessed yet, I'm not giving you a lot of the answers. I see my job here today is to raise these questions and to help you think through these questions so that you can help develop a different strategic framework. Because it's by asking and then answering these questions that we grow and be able to think a little bit outside of what our day-to-day calls for. And in that vein, you also need to take a look at your organization's infrastructure. What are the connections and how do they work? Organizational infrastructure consists of the systems, the protocols, the processes that give structure to the organization. It supports its key functions and embeds its routine practice. It's how you do things and how it makes it possible for you to do things. You could diagram it and it'd probably look a little something like that crazy octopus to the side of the screen. When you think about it, say you're a child welfare agency, infrastructure includes the policies and operating procedures that guide your practice and build a shared understanding of how to deliver those services. Infrastructure also includes an agency's systems for operations, from human resources training, supervision, communications, data evaluation, and continuous quality improvement. An organization's structures, processes, and systems institutionalize practices, procedures, and rules. It is a system. And so when you are looking at systems change, systems transformation, you need to understand your internal systems. So how are these systems working? How did they work during COVID-19? When you moved people to a remote working environment, how did your infrastructure change? How did your systems change? How did you do catch up to make sure that you were meeting those systems names? How can you change the system further to make things work better? What will you need in terms of systems to serve the people you are meant to serve? We also look at fixed versus variable versus semi-variable expenses. There's some wiggle room with your fixed expenses. For example, if you reduce your overhead by reducing the need for a fixed facility. Certainly 6 months of working remotely have given different alternatives to this. Do you have to move back to the office? Do you have to move back to that same office? What will that mean for your organization moving forward? Will it make a difference in terms of net revenue? The other consideration is variable expenses, program materials, etc. I'll give you an incredible example I have found in my own business. Every time I did a presentation like this, I would, and we did it in person, I would print up all the slides, put them into a nice binder. I had this lovely folder that cost me money. I have not incurred that cost since March, and probably will do so very infrequently going forward. Nor have I been driving thousands of miles a week like I used to. But I did have to invest in a better system for handling Zoom, for working so much, in my home office. So like you, I had to evaluate all of this. And because of this, have made changes in how I'm delivering my services. You have too. And so how your fixed, variable, and semi-variable expenses have changed. Look at that. Have your finance committee look at that. What does that mean? Does it provide opportunities? Here's some questions you should be asking. Besides labor restructuring, what else can I do? How can I conserve cash? Can I repurpose a facility? Our services are needed. How do we accommodate the demand? How do I deal with the financial increase in technology because everyone's working from home? Take the time to explore these questions. Now, the finances are only one part of this. Next, I want to talk to you about measuring financial sustainability and mission accountability. Your organization was not founded because of your finances. It was founded based on your mission. So when you are looking at your organization's financial viability, you cannot do so without considering your mission and the impact you want to have. Nor can a board do that. A board cannot decide to cut services because of financial considerations without taking the mission impact into consideration. This mission margin mapping tool is one that we at Danosky Associates almost always use when we are facilitating strategic plans for our clients. And we believe it is even more valuable today with COVID-19. As I said, decisions in a nonprofit organization cannot be made on the basis of finances alone because you have a mission, which is just as important as your finances. You need to blend them both. This tool does that. Now bear with me as I talk about the x-axis and y-axis. The x-axis represents profit or loss. You look at each of your programs and determine whether or not they are making money or losing money. Everything to the right is profit. Everything on the left is a financial loss. The y-axis going up and down represents the impact of your organization is having. And it is measured by looking at each of your programs and evaluating them based on 7 criteria. So if you look at this, the goal is to plot every program you offer on this grid right here. And those in the upper right-hand corner are high in impact and make money. You want to keep these programs and grow them. The programs over here on the left lose money, but are very high in impact. You love these programs, but need to find money to run them. The lower left quadrant loses money and is low in mission impact. You just need to cut these programs, cut them loose. And the lower right is low in mission, but makes money. This is where development is. This is where your fundraising is. Now, I have to tell you, development people argue all the time, but we may raise money based on mission. I know that, but development does not provide services. So development is in this lower quadrant. This funds this. And that's how the quadrant works. I'm going to show you how to put it all together. These are the 7 criteria for measuring the impact of your organization is having. This is what gets plotted on the y-axis, and you scale each of these, each program on a scale of 1 to 4 for each of these criteria. Alignment with core mission. How well is this program aligned with your organization's mission? Excellence in execution. How well do you execute this program? Do you do a great job? Or, is it so-so? You can use program evaluation, feedback from clients, direct observations, staff performance. Just how well do you deliver your program? Scale, volume, Client utilization and number of services completed. How many people do you serve? This is purely a numbers volume question. The next one, depth, that goes into the level of impact on people. How deep do you go? How much do you touch that client's life? If you offer homeless services and you provide transitional housing, and with that transitional housing, you offer case management for those who are living in your homes, that's depth. If you also offer a food bank, that's scale, because you're really not touching these people. You're touching them through the transitional living services. You cannot have both depth and volume. You would put yourself out of business. So you either have depth for a certain service or you have a lot of volume. Filling an important gap, pretty self-evident. Is anyone else doing what you're doing? If you went out of business, would someone else pick up what you do? Community building. Does your program help build community around the organization, which can be evaluated through interviews with community leaders or your own sense of it? And leverage, the degree to which a program or business line increases the impact of other programs. I recommend that you use a group of staff to do this together. Do not ask someone who is in charge of a particular program to rate their own program. You will not have an accurate view. Do it as a group. You can invite board members to join you with it, but I don't suggest board members doing this alone. They don't have the depth of knowledge to do this, but engage your senior staff in this exercise. And this is, and I can send you this. This is the rating form. So you see each of them and you give each one a rating. So you take those 7 criteria, you rate each one 1 to 4, add them up and then divide by 7, and it gives you a rating. So to recap this, identify all your discrete programs. Do so within reason. You don't necessarily have to identify subsets. After all, this has to be reasonable. If you have an overarching program, then you can do another assessment just for that program. So don't list 27 programs. It really should be somewhere between, 5, 7, maybe 12. So that's what I mean by reasonableness. Evaluate each program based on the 7 criteria. Assess the profit and loss of each program. Is that program making money or losing money? Your profit and loss should also include overhead and allocations for each program, but do not include restricted grant funding. We believe that the program should be evaluated based on its viable sustainability. Grant funding is not necessarily sustainable. We count that grant funding in the lower bottom right quadrant. And include the expenses for each program. So the worksheet you want to fill out looks like this. The business line, the expenses that it cost, profit or loss, and the mission impact. And when you fill it all out, voila, it looks like this. So this was done for an arts organization, where up here, the School of Art was the largest, most expensive, and most profitable program. The size of the bubble is the size of the expense. So how much it costs to run that program. Basically, this right here is supporting almost every other program over here. These are breaking even, so they're basically okay. They're losing big money in a gallery, common for art centers. But one of the question is, can you eliminate some of that loss? As you can see, their fundraising is only $50,000, and that's nowhere making up for this. I mean, it's probably covering this here, but this is totally funding this. Maybe that's okay. maybe that works. This is a great diagram to share with your board and your staff. Many, many times over the years, I've shared it with boards, and it's the first time they really understand the juxtaposition of their programs with finances. Because look, everything is above is high on the y-axis, and this is really high on the y-axis. And truly, there was occasionally some talk about whether they should reduce the School of Art. And you can see, no, this is their biggest, most impactful program. They really should figure out how, if anything, you can reduce expenses, but how can you grow this even more? This is also effective in terms of evaluating whether or not you should consider strategic alliances. Programs that might be, kind of down here, losing money, not high in impact, are ripe for partnerships. If you have a significant number of programs on the left side of the line, then it really means you are vulnerable and need to rethink your business model. We can review this in greater detail in our Zoom follow-up next meeting. And for those who may be interested in this, try doing the program criteria evaluation with one or two of your key programs and walk through the evaluation with some key staff. If you do this next week, we can explore how it went, what you have questions in, what maybe you did not. And if you would email me some of the questions you have before next week, I can focus on this. I see we have a question now. What if you don't generate revenue through fee for service and you're 100% grant public funded? So great question, Melissa. I differentiate between foundation grants and state contracts. So if you receive state contracts, because I know a lot of state contracts are called grants, but you are supposed to deliver a certain services in a certain way and the state funds you, then that should be listed with the program. But if you get 3-year funding for a program from the community for the Greater New Hartford Community Foundation, then that should be considered not part of that program, and it should be set aside where the resources are. Because it's important to understand if that funding goes away, then that program might go away, and that's what we want to look at. All right. Oops, I jumped a little bit too, okay. So the question, how do you move the matrix? That's a question that should be engaged with your board and your staff. How do you increase program impacts? Maybe you can do a better job in execution or change the program to be more aligned with your mission. Or if you're reconsidering your mission, maybe revising it, might the program rate higher with this new rendition? Can you change the revenue or expense to make it slightly more profitable? Or are there programs you should just let go, especially in the wake of COVID-19? These are the questions you should be asking, and now you have some data to use in your analysis. The other thing you should consider when doing an internal assessment are factors inhibiting success. I've listed a few here. For many mental health or disability organizations, the feeling out there is that you need to be a $10 to $15 million organization to thrive today. Is that true? Is that not true? Are you having challenges recruiting and or retaining staff? Some of these need to be things that you need to think about. Are you able to pivot to a differentiated model for fundraising? So some of this, you can do some scenario planning as you're looking at this. So this is a scenario planning tool that I think is kind of nice. We could certainly send you this template. So define, explore, create, communicate, act, embed, some of the roles you should think about when you're looking at scenario planning. In addition to what we've looked at relative to your programs, your services, and your finances, There are also other assessments you might consider, and whether or not to include them is really up to your organization and how you are perceiving your vision, mission, and the people you're meant to serve. Some of you may go through some sort of accreditation or program review. Are there items of note, either good or bad, that give you pause? Some boards go through a self-assessment during a planning process. I love doing that in conjunction with planning to evaluate the board's own capacity and how to become stronger. Employee surveys can be beneficial, a fundraising assessment. Each of these, however, can be timely and costly, and whether or not you should go there is really based on your capacity and what you want from your plan. What do you need to know to look at 6, 12, 18 months and create a new framework? One answer is not right for everyone, but you really need to think about what do you need to really think about your organization differently. I think for the purposes of planning during a pandemic and meeting the moment, some of these will take a lower priority, and they may be done as a follow-up. Your services, financials, and alignment with your mission are the highest priority. The rest will fall into place. You also have to understand the world around you, especially as it shifts and heaves. What's happening in the worlds beyond you, and how are other organizations, peoples, and communities responding? You can't find out unless you research and ask. Similar to internal assessments, there are a whole boatload of things you can assess and analyze. You really need to stop and think what is important and what is going to make a difference. Do you really need a competitor analysis, or can you name them off the top of your head? You may already be in touch with them and know exactly how they're doing. One thing I highly, highly recommend is to review the Wellness Index research conducted by both the Foundation for Greater New Haven and the Valley Foundation. This is a wealth of information right in your own backyard. The foundations compile it every few years, so it is relevant and up to date, even with COVID-19, because what we know is that those people who've fallen through the cracks are falling further. So it's not like there is data in there that isn't relevant. You can find it on their websites. And Valerie, tonight, Ganji, I noticed you just posted an update from Data Haven, which has been looking at some of these things in greater detail. So thank you. There is one external assessment I think is essential: asking for input from people with lived experiences. Now, more than ever, it is critically important that you ask the people you are serving or meant to serve. They have a different perspective, a vital perspective, one that is at the core of the work you do. This research can be done in a number of ways. Often it is best to use your staffs to do this research, because it should be done by people they trust. You should not have any preconceived notions. For example, when I was facilitating the Working Cities Challenge for Danbury, we embarked on an intense outreach program. We enlisted a few people who were trusted in different neighborhoods. We were trying to decide how to improve social economic conditions, and we had all decided that a coordinated, one-stop work training programs with wraparound services would be significant systems change, until we conducted a survey. And we found there were no problems with the training programs out there. It's just that no one would come to them because there was no trust. So the 3 initiatives we launched were build trust, using Kellogg's transformational model, provide more affordable, accessible childcare, provide more training for ESL programs. None of these had anything to do with work training programs. And that's the point. If you assume it's something, you won't learn what really matters. The questions you should be asking when you conduct this survey are: how has this pandemic and surrounding issues affected you? How has it changed your lives? Are you receiving the services you need? If not, what do you need? Is it convenient to receive these services? If not, why not? What would make your life better? What do you dream about? What do you want for your children? Help them to reimagine their world. And then, how does this impact your vision and mission? There are also constituents of your organization who are not people you serve, but whose opinions should be considered. Depending on the programs you offer, there might be experts who can provide valuable insight. Teachers, doctors, nurses, musicians, collaborators, case managers from other organizations. Some of you have members or subscribers, symphony orchestras, libraries, land trusts. What do they think? How about your elected officials or commissions? What are your donors' perspectives? And who are your opinion leaders? Have you talked to Jackie or Val? While they may not be able to take all your questions tomorrow, they are happy to speak with you and have a vast amount of knowledge. They won't tell you what to do, but they can tell you what they're hearing. You can even convene your colleagues, the people who have shared this strategic planning framework experience for a mutually beneficial conversation. You should also look beyond your organization and your neighborhood. What are the trends nationally? COVID-19 is not going away in a month or two. And with potential spikes, what will that mean? With recent layoffs of such large companies as Raytheon, American Airlines, Boeing, unemployment is going up. Many who lost their jobs back in March are now falling off the radar. Racial equity, justice, and unrest will prevail until we come to some reckoning in our personal lives and in our country. There is much work to be done. And what is your role in that work? It must be defined within the strategic framework you are forming. The elections will have a profound ramifications regardless of who wins. The great division in our country is not magically going to go away. What will that mean for your organization? What are the implications under a Trump scenario or a Biden scenario, a Republican or Democratic Senate or House? Do you need to factor that into your scenario planning? What will be your advocacy efforts going forward? When I am working with an organization, I often like to Google similar organizations around the country. What are they doing? You should do the same. Network with fellow executive directors. Some of this research is just being aware, getting outside of your own organization, looking at things with new eyes and going, what if? What if? When you are doing this research, here are some questions. What environmental trends do you need to be aware of? Where is the greatest need? Does this change anything, and how so? What opportunities are there? What will be required to take advantage of those opportunities? Who are your competitors? Can they become collaborators? What are their agendas and priorities? Is there room for alignment? There's a lot of information I've presented here and a lot to process, I know that. Once you've had some time to review some data, do some analysis, there's a fundamental question you must ask. What will drive your organization going forward? What's necessary to achieve your vision and your mission? Is it growth? Do you need to expand? Do you need a more highly trained staff to take advantage of opportunities? Maybe trained in different ways. And with that training, do you need to pay more? Create career ladders? Is infrastructure a driver? What systems, technology? Is it greater program diversity? Or is it greater diversity in your programs? And can you grow and fulfill your vision through strategic alliances or even collective impact? As I was building this training and creating this deck, I could not resist including something about systems change as a strategy. I want to give a shout out to my new friend Dan, with whom I share an admiration for Danella Meadows and the work she has done with systems change. Can you work with other organizations to really move the needle? They don't have to be in your industry or in your field. Can a symphony, a library, and a domestic violence organization create synergies? How about a school, a land trust, and a food bank? Begin to think in terms of systems. I love the diagram by Linda Booth Sweeney. A heap versus a system. A system is focused around a core value. I also like the iceberg model. This moves from a sentinel event that is clearly visible to patterns of behavior, systems structures, to mental models way below the surface, which you need to probe. I believe this will be how we will look at organizations and dynamics and transitions in the future. So begin imagining it now. It doesn't have to be on a large scale. It can be small. I include this here so that in forming your strategic framework, you can think big, think bold, think collaborative, and think of your vision and your mission and who you are meant to serve. The key to strategic planning is to view it as erecting something very special, spectacular, meaningful, transformational. All these components are the scaffolding upon which you are building the future. And you keep adding to that scaffolding the more you build. Your vision, mission, values, people served or not served provide the first level. As you explore and build from there, you need to understand your organization, where it is, where it could go, what is needed to get there. How does the external world beyond your organization impact that? What is happening that you should be aware of? What is your role? What do you need to do? And then what might you fundamentally change or shift? I would now like to encourage your questions. Please go to the Q&A box and write them there. 2 weeks from now, we will talk about pivoting your programs. How do you look at this data and what does it tell you? Your programs are the means through which you can fulfill your mission. But you cannot develop programs without the scaffolding we have discussed today. So please share your questions. Thank you for spending this time with me. And thank you, Jackie and Val, for creating this space. I know we all wish for the world to look significantly different as we emerge from these crises. It begins with us, and most important with you, because you are the change the world needs. And how you reimagine and engage your organization for this brave new world is what will make a difference, large or small, and forge a better future for us all. I will see you next week, hopefully, as we discuss some of this in more detail. And if not next week, then the following week at our next webinar. So please, if you have any questions, any thoughts, any comments, share them with me now. No questions, no comments. You're processing the information, a lot of information here to process. You will get a copy of the recording, the deck, and I will send you out those forms to do the mission margin mapping. And I do encourage a few of you to at least take the opportunity to look at this. I'm going to try to get it out to you today. So Jackie says, I'll be happy to follow up on your question. I didn't give you a full answer. So if you want to talk to her before next week, I can connect you or I can give you some insight. And as I said, absolutely. The mission margin deck is complicated. And so if you have any questions, please email me. And I'm happy to also set up a phone call with you as well. Thank you, Harold. All right. Thank you again, and thank you all for all you're doing to ensure that we have the safety net you provide, as stretched as I know it is becoming. I wish you all well, and I will see you next week. Bye, everyone. Bye-bye.